This is Heidi with your fire weather briefing for Eastern Area for the week of April 14th, 2026. We're holding at a PL2 nationally, and the southwest geographic area is at a PL2, while southern area is at a 3. I wanted to take a look at temperature trends again, and I left up the March map just because it does kind of set the precedent for where we are. And of course, we did see a very warm March across most of the lower 48 states. As we look at April here on the right-hand side through yesterday, I kind of think of these white and light green and yellow areas as being very close to normal, within a few degrees on either side. So once again, we're seeing the warmest temperatures through the southern tier, with some of these dark browns getting into the 7 to 10 degrees warmer than normal range. Now, the good thing is out west, we see that it is warmer than normal, but not nearly what it was in March. So there is a little bit of a reprieve going on out that way. Of course, we're only halfway through the month, so things could change. Moving on to take a look at what our precipitation trends are. Again, last month we saw this wet area kind of in the middle part of eastern area, bookended on either side, and to the south by drier conditions. And we're seeing that same general trend again. These purple values are 3 to 4 times normal precipitation, so very wet throughout much of the Great Lakes states and through the Midwest. But take a look here. The western side of Minnesota, especially the southwest, has been quite dry. And then there's this very sharp line cutting through some of the Midwest states where it just has not seen much rain to the south of it. And that's because most of these storm cells that we're seeing are following a very similar track from one day to the next. So most of these southern parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then over into the mid-Atlantic has just been very dry. Even up into New England, we've seen this very dry pattern, especially in the south. Now, for the last 7 days, there was this heavy precipitation line, once again, from the kind of northwest corner of Missouri, southeastern Iowa, and on towards the Great Lakes. That did catch part of northern New York with some heavier precipitation. But again, it's really kind of this fine line. And then as you get farther south, just not much precipitation to speak of. So we're seeing this long-term drying pattern going on through the southern part of eastern area and over along the east coast. For warnings, watches, and advisories, this is what we're seeing right now, or what I'm seeing right now as I'm recording this. There are a lot of flood watches out for parts of the Great Lakes states, and then these yellow and orange areas and the red ones are for severe thunderstorms. And though this will probably be changed up quite a bit by Wednesday morning, I expect that most afternoons we'll see some iteration of severe storms moving across our region once again. So that'll be something to watch as the week progresses. For today, Wednesday, expect to see very warm temperatures moving into much of the region. Check this out. We are looking at upper 80s and even 90s in parts of the mid-Atlantic. That's going to be record-setting numbers. At the same time, the relative humidities have moderated across a good swath of the north, and of course wherever those storm cells are, the RHs bump up, but there is still this very good chance to see numbers getting down into the mid 20% range for parts of the mid-Atlantic and West Virginia. So on the significant fire potential, you can see that some of those areas are a little elevated. For the most part, winds aren't strong there, but it does look like this area around Maryland may have some gustier southwest winds to help bump up concerns there. And again, the 24-hour precip graphic shows this very sharp line cutting through that same area where precipitation is just not expected to get farther south. And the surface analysis here, these hatched yellow areas are potentially severe thunderstorms. So again, for Wednesday, looking at the chance for severe storms, heavy rain and flooding in these red hatched areas, and maybe even the chance for some tornadoes out there. The bigger area here of green is also for thunderstorms and rain, just not expecting to see severe activity in those regions. Notice that all the way up into New England, there's the chance for some showers for the day today. Now moving on to Thursday, the hot temperatures continue to hold, and if anything, it looks like they might expand a little bit more up the East Coast. Expect that chance for some 90s again through the Mid-Atlantic, a lot of 80s, and beyond that, even just a big swath of 70s across the entire region. At the same time, we see the humidities continuing to decrease around the Mid-Atlantic and over along western Minnesota, down into western Iowa, that's also looking to be more of an area of concern with those lowering humidities. And that region does have some winds associated, as does parts of Ohio and into the Midwest. So for tomorrow, the significant fire potential grows to include that area in the western parts of Minnesota and Iowa, and also continues to hold through the same area of the Mid-Atlantic. That line of thunderstorms does shift a little bit for tomorrow, and you can see that there's not as much severe potential out there on the surface analysis, but there is still a big swath for thunderstorms, and that line of moisture has moved a little farther to the east, encompassing more of New England and New York, but still keeping conditions pretty dry over from the southern part of New England down into the Mid-Atlantic. As we get onto Friday, still pretty much hot, hot, hot in the south. A lot of 70s through the middle regions, and then a little cooler to the north. And you can see there is a little cold air pooling up way to the northwest. That'll come into play later in the weekend. Minimum RHs actually recover somewhat out in the west, but still looking at some strong winds out there, especially through that western side of Minnesota and Iowa. And since it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of rain in the forecast there, we're going to keep elevated conditions for another day as we move into Friday. Now, farther to the east, things soften a little bit, so I've dropped conditions down into the yellow range for West Virginia, Ohio, and the Mid-Atlantic, and conditions north of there are looking to be just a little bit damper with that moisture that moves through. There is still the chance for thunderstorms out there, especially throughout the Mississippi Basin, and then also over in the northeast. But overall, this frontal system just continues to dawdle in about the same place that it's been. Now, the medium range shows that things finally start to change up a little bit, and on Saturday, there's a push of that colder air coming down, and that moves a cold front across the region from the west to the east. By Sunday, it's pretty much right along the east coast, and behind that, this high pressure system sets up with cool but very dry air. And as this moves through on Sunday and into Monday, we've got some pretty good isobars packed in here, so a pretty good pressure gradient, which means it will also be windy behind that cold front. So cool, dry, windy conditions lead to much heightened concern throughout the eastern part of the region. Really, all of the area of interest will be a place to watch as we get into early next week. On Tuesday, that high pressure starts to shift off, and behind there, another frontal system may move in. But before that happens, it looks like winds are in the forecast for the western side as well. So all of our AOR will probably have some heightened concern through the first half of next week. Beyond that, we have the temperature and precipitation outlooks for the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day periods. Overall, it looks like warmer weather is expected to be in store for most of the region, with perhaps up in the northeast a little bit cooler, at least for the 6 to 10 day period. For precipitation, overall wetter than normal conditions do seem to dominate in the west. And then the 8 to 14 days tries to put in a little bit of increased chances for wetter than normal over those mid-Atlantic states and up into New England, but I'm not buying it at this point. I think we saw the same thing last week, and that's certainly not how it's panning out. So I believe this area is going to continue to stay exceptionally dry. I know you all have seen the extended outlook, taking a look at the wildland fire potential for the next quarter. So keeping conditions normal throughout eastern area will continue to be the story as we move into the early summer months. Taking a look at precip, both past, present, and future, we've seen some really heavy precipitation in the northwestern part of Missouri, southeastern Iowa, and on towards the Great Lakes, capturing over to northern New York. And we already took a look at that earlier, but once again, I just want to point out how dry it's been farther to the south. Meanwhile, the snow depth graphic showing the changes over the last 7 days indicates that most of the snowpack is gone, with just a few tiny areas, mostly in Minnesota and Maine, having a little bit of snowpack still clinging on. However, with the warm temperatures in the forecast, that's likely to disappear completely in the next couple of days. Meanwhile, thunderstorms in the forecast pretty much every day for the next week is expected to accumulate quite a bit of rain across the Midwest in that same pattern over into the Great Lakes states. And these purple areas are looking close to 2 inches of precipitation in the next week. The reds are getting above 3 inches. So significant amounts of rain, and some of that may come all at once, so flood advisory is also likely to be out there. Otherwise, we see this sharp line between the blues and the greens, keeping in mind that the greens are less than a half an inch of precip, and even that's probably questionable in those areas. We also see this dry area throughout the western part of Minnesota, continuing to be a bit of a challenge for us. Overall, my confidence is pretty good in how these models are handling the precipitation. I expect this is pretty close to what we'll see looking back a week from now. On the Great Lakes Fire and Fuel sites, I wanted to take a look once again at the initial spread index for the next few days. You can see here that on Thursday, that area of western Minnesota really starts to have a heightened threat with a bit of more spread potential. That holds into Friday and actually expands to be a larger footprint, probably down into Iowa as well, and then shrinks back a little bit again on Saturday. But that area will be the area to pay attention to throughout the Great Lakes states. Kind of rounding out our fuels here, this ERC map shows that the concentration of driest fuels is still over West Virginia and Ohio, but much of the mid-Atlantic and the southern part of eastern area continued to be a threat. And it doesn't look like these numbers are changing very much. If anything, here in the mid-Atlantic, we see those up arrows indicating more intense conditions. Down in the lower left, we've got the green vegetation fraction coming from NASA satellite imagery and the Land Information System, and this really doesn't show much change in the last 7 days, with just a few areas in the south, part of Ohio, and part of Maine having some green up having occurred. Meanwhile, the drought monitor shows that throughout this area that's had those heavy rains in the Midwest, conditions have really improved. There's a lot more moisture in the soil now, but we still have eyes on parts of Minnesota, the southernmost part of Missouri, and even southern Illinois. And then we've got, of course, the mid-Atlantic states where things keep getting drier, as well as a good chunk of the Northeast from the middle of Vermont over into Maine, really looking quite dry. That has not changed much in the last week. So to wrap things up, this week is going to be a mixed bag of weather. We've got record heat expected, especially along the East Coast. Severe thunderstorms are in the forecast almost every day throughout much of the Midwest and even expanding into the Northeast at times. And then we also have high fire danger for much of the Mid-Atlantic and at times farther to the west. Fire potential is going to be elevated overall throughout the week, and then on Sunday and into Monday, things really increase behind that dry cold front. And you can see the 7-day maps here for Sunday and Monday. We've actually got some wind triggers in, starting in West Virginia and then expanding for more of the Mid-Atlantic and also Ohio on Monday. So we've got what looks like another busy week in the world of fire potential for eastern area. We'll keep our eyes on this and see if this cold front materializes as dry as we expect it might be for early next week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all have a safe week.